Alright lads, so over the last 2 or so months, we have been tackling every single guild quest on the very hard difficulty. I wanted to see if I could beat it on both my main and also free-to-play account, and luckily I was able to beat all of them on both accounts. And now that we officially wrapped up every single guild quest on the very hard difficulty, I wanted to spend time talking about what characters actually gotten better with this update, and what characters have actually gotten worse. Because it's no surprise that the very hard difficulty guild quest kind of changed things. Due to the pause in between each individual wave, Caleb essentially killed Nukin, and in my opinion, that was for the best. At the same time, with the raised amount of HP, and of course also defense, it added a lot more value in other characters like normal attack characters. And we're going to highlight all of these characters in today's video. And of course, if we're talking about characters that got better with the very hard guild quest, there is no one better to talk about than Maid Aaroniero. This is a character that came out and wasn't really talked about. She was a good character, she was cute, but as a character that was meta, this really wasn't it. Like, she had some usage in the Hollow Guild Quest, and that was really about it. And it was only really until the very hard Guild Quest came out where people started to appreciate and understand the value that she does actually bring. And we've explained it multiple times now, but just for those that are wondering, what makes this Aaroniero so good, better than any other support character in the entire game, is because she offers all 4 things you want in a support character. For starters, the SA2 is a boost attack, providing your team with 43% extra attack, focus, and also defense. More stats in the very hard guild quest is important, and she gives the most stats alongside other boost characters. But alongside that boost SA2, she also does provide a barrier, a multi-barrier, 5-hit barrier for herself, 3-hit barrier for your teammates. We saw in the very hard guild quest that barriers are very important, especially if you are using a character that can't really provide great crowd control. Because other than using a Vortex SA2, the only way to stop yourself and your teammates from getting hit is by using a barrier character like this. So providing both on one strong attack is really good. But alongside that, the cherry on the top, she can inflict status, paralysis, and if she does, it's stopping you from taking damage for around 10 or so seconds. But of course, most important is she's the only character in the game to have this. Alongside what she also offers is of course the complete status immunity, which she can share to your team. We noticed in a lot of those really weird guild quest weeks where the best character to use doesn't offer any support in terms of status immunity, and alongside that, a lot of the characters maybe designed for guild quests didn't have immunity. And if you are someone that doesn't have any links or accessories to give your character immunity, one of the best ways to do that was just to simply use Maid Aaroniero. So overall, what she offers with the extra attack, the defensive capabilities, the fact that she can get the immunity, just essentially makes her the best support character for the very hard guild quest. You unironically could use her in every single week of guild quests. And in some teams, she just makes the team better. So out of every single character in the game, the very hard difficulty of guild quest easily has been the best thing to happen for this character because she is now really good and valuable to have on any account. So much so that I actually want her now. And of course, she also did get voted into this year's poll selection banner, which I don't think would have happened unless the very hard difficulty guild quest was introduced. Of course, the other set of characters that got really good with this new very hard guild quest, characters that I haven't used in a very long time and started to invest in more thanks to this new addition of a new difficulty, is of course normal attack damage characters. With the fact that the enemies have a significantly large amount of HP, if you're using free SP characters and you can't kill the quest fast enough, well, they're most likely going to die and you're going to be wasting a lot of DPS. Where net characters though, normal attack damage characters, because they're a lot more flexible per se, they can take hits, but at the same time they can dish out non-stop damage with their normal attacks. And it wasn't really a surprise that normal attack characters would have gotten better with the new addition of very hard difficulty, because we kind of saw the same thing back with the hard difficulty. The normal difficulty got to a point where we were just clearing with free SP characters. So when Caleb introduced the hard difficulty and using free SP characters 1 as optimal, we just resorted to using 1 SP lead and 2 normal attack damage characters. And we essentially saw the same thing for the most part with the very hard difficulty as well. But in my opinion, it was just really cool using these normal attack damage characters that I pulled for, or maybe just got accidentally, didn't really care much about unless they were brave battle orientated. And thanks to this new difficulty, I was able to use them and actually saw quite good success. Characters that I was really happy to own with this new difficulty, of course, was 1000 Year Bloodwell Eisen. He was really good in his quest. But in particular, someone like this New Year's Renji is someone that I was constantly using in multiple weeks of guild quests, and he was a character that I didn't mean to actually get at the start of the year, but was very happy to have him with this new addition of the very hard difficulty. At the same time, I thought it was really cool that I was able to use characters that I pulled for years ago and would actually meta characters in their particular quests. Misaki, for example. It's something that, of course, was really good when she first got introduced at the end of 2020, but I haven't used her for like 2 years. But when the ranged no affiliation guild quest came around, I was making sure to use her because she was the best booster for that particular week. And that might be because the lack of options, but still, in my opinion, it was really cool to take out a character that I haven't used in years. I was actually really happy to pull her in the most recent mid-month banner where I did actually get her 5 out of 5. So in a way, I added a lot more usability and value to characters that have been out into the game for over a couple years now. Of course, I wanted to highlight this character too, Tokinara. I think everyone that has played BBS over the last 4 or so years that were playing when this character came out, this character was an absolute treat. And he's still a great character as far as no-attack damage characters go, but with the way the game's progressed, I don't really use him that much. But I was really happy to take him into the Ranged Serpent Guild Quest where he actually performed really, really good. Of course, the same can be said for 1000 Year Blood War Soifon, one of the best resurrections to happen early this year, receiving new skills more so designed for her usability in guild quests, as she did pick up freeze resistance, more no attack damage, and of course also the booster skill. Now when she got resurrected, it was cool, it was nice and all, but you could just nuke with 7th anniversary Ichigo, so it wasn't all that exciting. With the new very hard difficulty of guild quest though, I made sure to put her in my team and she was the best character for that week. Now along with the new difficulty, we also got more weeks of guild quests. A guild quest that used to be Quincy's, Stamritters, Squad Zero, and also human enemies all together were now split up. So Squad Zero and humans were put together, and there was a ranged and melee variation, and then Quincy and Stamritters was put together in their own quest, and once more there was a ranged and melee variation of that quest. Now, to a certain extent, this hasn't been the most exciting quest, given the fact that there's been a very limited number of options, and that's one of the bad things about this quest, is that we really weren't ready. Maybe it was a bit too soon for Caleb to split up these particular guild quest weeks. I mean, if we look at some of the options here, for example, the ranged human and Squad Zero guild quests, this quest was basically if you didn't have Macy, you weren't going to beat it. The ranged Quincy Stamritter guild quests weren't even that better either, and the quest for the most part was unbeatable unless you pulled for the new Toshiro, or you were lucky enough to have a duped out Rurikon who hasn't been in some banners in quite some time. So while it was kind of a bad thing right now, since again there isn't that many options for those particular weeks, but in a way I was kind of excited about it because it added a lot more usability to basically every single character here because of one character in particular. And that of course is 1000 Year Blood War Yamamoto. With the fact that 4 killers were all in one particular quest, Quincy, Stamritter, Human, Squad Zero, and the fact that you could nuke on the hard difficulty of guild quests, there was no reason to ever pull for any other character but Yamamoto for the purpose of guild quest content. Now of course for free-to-play players that don't want to pull for every single character, it's a good thing, right? Having to only pull for one character instead of like 20 plus characters isn't really a bad thing. But in the overarching game, if you wanted value on a certain character and someone came out with Quincy or Stamritter killer, you know, they were always being compared to 1000 Year Blood War Yamamoto, and in that case they're always going to lose because Yama can just use one Sobom and clear the entire quest. Now that they've killed Nukin in the very hard difficulty of guild quests, and of course split up some of the guild quest weeks too, characters like Toshiro were actually really good, and I was actually kind of excited to have now, which originally I never really used them in guild quests because again I just had Yamamoto. Same goes for Macy and also Balgo, characters that sure I could have used in the Quincy, Stamritter, Squad Zero human guild quest, but never did because again Yama just did their job and better. With them splitting it up, it's overall added a lot more usability and value onto those characters that I've always wanted to use in guild quests but couldn't because again Yama just did the job in one Sobon. And that even goes for other nukers too in other different weeks. Again, Yama, a holo killer, was able to be used in the ranged and melee holo guild quests, and he was able just to nuke that quest with one Sobon. Bruno of course was a character I was very excited about, and he's a really good character, but unfortunately when it came to guild quest content, he wasn't that valuable because Holo and Espada already had access to nukers. If you had Yamamoto, and you didn't even need Yamamoto duped out, if you had the renewed version of Okiura, there was no reason to own this character for the sake of guild quest content. But now again, they've killed Nukin. Bruno is actually really, really good and the best character for the melee holo guild quest and also the melee Espada guild quest. So for those Bruno fans out there, or for those that had a particular favorite character, that potential character, depending on who it is, has seen more value thanks to these changes. The same can even be said for the 2 newly released captain killers. Nuking was a big thing on the hard difficulty of guild quests, and for the longest of time we couldn't nuke with a captain killer. There was no good captain leader, and that meant that we were still using someone like 1000 Year Blood War Yamamoto in the captain killer guild quest when he didn't even have killer. Now we all knew during the 8th anniversary they had to, if Caleb wanted money, they would release a captain killer nuker, and they kind of did that in the form of Yachiru Unohana. We all know she's the best character in the game. She was really good on release. But the way they designed her, at least when it came to Captain Nukin, she wasn't a traditional nuker. Like, sure, she had the status augment boost, she also had Rampage and Devastation, but she did take a bit of investment to be a nuker when compared to the usual nukers, again, like Yamamoto. So of course, during the second part of the 8th anniversary, a lot of people pulled for her because it is Yachiru, because she's a great character, but at the same time, at least in the Guild Quest community, a lot of people wanted her because she was meta in the Captain Killer Guild Quest. But then a month later, they released Bambietta. Now, of course, Yachiru is a better character, but when it came to Guild Quests, Bambietta was the more traditional nuker, right? She had Devastation, she had Bombardment, she had the status augment boost, she had weakened defense with more damage to burning enemies. When it came to Guild Quest content, even though, of course, there was a ranged and melee Guild Quest week, there was no reason to have Yachiru, and in a way, if you pulled for Yachiru, it was kind of wasted orbs for Guild Quest content in particular, because Bambietta came out a month later and just did that job better. And I remember when Bambietta first got announced, there were people that were kind of annoyed at K-Lab because they just pulled for Yachiru, and now a month later she was invalidated because Bambietta simply just had a better soul bomb. But of course now, the very hard difficulty, you can't bring Bambietta into the melee Captain Guild Quest, and at the same time you can't bring Yachiru in the ranged Captain Guild Quest. Technically you can, but you're not really supposed to. So again, another example to a certain extent of them killing Nukin added more value to both of these characters, right? Bambietta, in a way, for Guild Quest content made Yachiru redundant, but now Yachiru is the best character for her particular weeks, and same goes for Bambietta. In a way, you want to have both of these characters now, and if you do, they're going to be really good for their particular Guild Quest weeks. And with that, I think I've covered everything, right? Overall, I feel like the difficulty itself was actually quite fun. I do think the change was actually necessary, because the way the hard difficulty Guild Quest was going is that almost every single week had a nuker available, and sure, it was nice to be able to compete in a competitive level just owning 1 to 4 or 5 characters, but just going in and using one button to sub them all your way through, you know, it started to lose its charm after a while, and it wasn't really that good for the overarching health of the game. Now with the new difficulty, sure, it does in a way require you to have more characters, a larger roster of characters, but that's kind of the point of a gacha game. And at the same time, most importantly, it added a lot of value to a lot of characters too, again, that we just covered. Made Orihime. Any character with a barrier move has been really important in this Guild Quest to provide extra support and safety for your characters that potentially want to stay at full stamina. If I'm being honest, I really didn't care much about barrier characters. Same with Vortex characters, tracking Vortex characters. Of course, have always been really good, but when it came to Guild Quest content, you never looked at the importance and value of a Vortex because you were always just soul bombing with one attack. Those that do have tracking Vortexes have been really valuable for this quest to provide that really good crowd control, and that's definitely going to be the meta going forward. It always has been, to be fair, but now when it comes to Guild Quest, tracking Vortexes have seen significantly more value. Shared complete stats immunity has also been really good for Guild Quests, especially when tied to a character has a Vortex SA2 like this Yamamoto. Of course, no attack damage characters have gotten better, and it's kind of surprising ever since the introduction of the very hard Guild Quest, we've only received one no attack damage character. I surely thought over the last couple of some months, Caleb would have thrown a bunch of no attack damage characters at us because they are important and great to have for their respective Guild Quest weeks. And to a certain extent too, I've actually started to understand and appreciate the value of Lacerate as a status augment, because that also does stop the enemies from even doing damage to you because they can't use attacks. It's definitely an unconventional way of crowd control. The best way to protect your team is, of course, tracking Vortexes, barrier SA2s, but at the same time, using characters like White, for example, have been quite good because when you apply Lacerate and you have a very high chance to do so, it just stops the enemies from even doing damage to you, which is actually kind of funny. And we've only been really highlighting characters that have gotten better with this Guild Quest. There are, of course, some characters, skills, soul traits, for example, that have taken a hit with this new difficulty. Now, those that took the biggest hit were those that are soul bomb nukers, again, because they've killed Nukin, right? You can't nuke in the very hard Guild Quest. Fortunately, though, most of the nukers that we did actually have, and those that you potentially invested in, have also been the best characters for their respective weeks. Many given the fact that they've had, you know, really high strong attack damage output, tracking Vortexes, for example. But if we start to scroll down a tad bit more, those older nukers that you could have used in the hard difficulty of Guild Quest, some of them have kind of lost their value. Most notably, Christmas Noel, for example. You know, she was the best nuker for the no affiliation and Holo Guild Quest, and that's the sole reason why I wanted to get her max transcended, and I did that. And unfortunately now in the very hard difficulty of Guild Quest, she's not that good. she's not that good. Of course, as someone still does a respectable amount of damage, and she herself can still provide some decent crowd control, and once more, her someone can allow your teammates to revive. Like, she's an optional character, you can use her, but there's just way better characters now. She's definitely overshadowed by someone like 1000 Year Blood or Yamamoto, renewed Aaroniero, and when it comes to no affiliation, you're better off using someone like Macy, for example. But I haven't used her once in the very hard guild quest, which is kind of unfortunate considering much times I used it in the hard difficulty guild quests. So I would definitely say someone like Noelle took a hit. Same goes for Bruna and also Arp Ichigo. They were kind of like the first generation of nukers, and then nuking potential was really reliant on them being 5 out of 5. In a way, back then, it was more pay to win. It started to get easier when they introduced nukers that didn't have to be max transcended. And once more, we're kind of in a position right now where, sure, having a max transcended character is good, but if you're just trying to beat it, which is the most important part, 1 out of 5 and 2 out of 5 are perfectly fine, especially if it's a more recent character that just has really good damage on their strong attack damage. But yeah, Arpik and Bruna are characters that you don't really use anymore in the very hard difficulty. Even some, like, very niche characters like Tsukishima, for example, Yuha, believe it or not, Tag Team Omaida, 1000 Year Blood or Byaku, for example, is characters that we demonstrated that are actually good in the hard difficulty of Guild Quest because surprisingly they can nuke. Yeah, those characters are basically being killed because you are not taking them into the very hard difficulty of Guild Quest. Another thing that's kind of lost a bit of value, in my opinion, to a certain extent, again, only in the very hard guild quest, is full stamina damage soul traits. Originally, the meta for guild quests, especially if you are using free SP characters, is to give them as much damage as possible in the shortest amount of time. And the best way to do that was to stack full stamina damage and strong attack damage. You didn't really care about recharge because the idea is once all your strong attacks are done, the quest should be done. And if you can't do that, then you need to invest in your characters more. So full stamina damage soul traits, especially ones like this at 30%, were really good as a link. Those resurrectable characters with full stamina damage and also strong attack damage were also really good because they gave you the most damage possible without having to worry about having the lack of recharge. Well, now, since there are cooldowns in between each phases, not having recharge is a massive detriment. So full stamina damage soul trait, especially with strong attack damage, have definitely lost a bit of value, at least when it comes to guild quest content. They're still good in epic raids and of course also Senkemono content, but for guild quest, I don't use them anymore. But while it's unfortunate those soul traits have lost a bit of value, in my opinion, recharge and full stamina damage or recharge and strong attack damage have seen more value, right? Because now these soul traits are really good because you want to get as much recharge as you possibly can get, but at the same time, you also want to get as much damage, extra damage you possibly can get. And soul traits like recharge and full stamina have been the best way to actually do that. Additionally, given the fact that we basically have almost no recharge and no attack damage soul traits, these have been really good to put on normal attack damage characters. Characters like this Safui Soifon, for example, a normal attack damage character with a barrier and boost SA2. If you can't clear the quest fast enough, you want to make sure that boost is always active, as well as the barrier. So giving a recharge and normal attack damage links would be something that you want to do, but again, unfortunately, those don't exist. So the only way to give her the recharge, but also at the same time give her extra damage as soon as she can stay at full stamina, is by giving her those recharge and full stamina damage soul traits. So these soul traits in particular have been definitely great for both NAD characters, attack-based characters, and of course also SP characters. And that of course also applies for recharge and strong attack damage. Any way to buff your damage while also getting recharge have been really important for the very hard difficulty of guild quests. But anyway lads, with that said, that was the video for today. It's just highlighting the very hard difficulty of guild quest now that we've been playing around with it for like the last 2 or so months. I think the gameplay changes overall brought a lot of positives. A lot of characters seeing significantly more value because of these changes. Right now, the main negative is essentially just the fact that certain guild quest weeks are very limited on numbers and options, which can hopefully get fixed over the next couple of so months with Caleb introducing new characters to make those particular, maybe more difficult guild quests a lot more accessible and also easier. I've had a blast just trying out different teams, characters, compositions, trying out characters that I haven't really used over the last couple of so years. So if anything, that's like the main thing that I like about this new difficulty change, or new addition of the difficulty. With that said though, over the next couple of so weeks, I'm definitely going to be trying out different guild quest teams. Most of our 1 out of 5 performance to show that you don't need max transcended characters. You just got to make sure you know what you're doing. And in certain cases, unfortunately, as already mentioned, there's not that many options. In certain cases, it maybe comes down to owning a character or two. But that should hopefully, again, get easier as we do go by the months. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the video, though. See you guys next time. Take care, and peace.